Let's talk about the complete opposite of Dave. Let's talk about Lula a little bit. Um, so I know, I mean, I follow this case very regularly. What is your impression of it? I'm curious.
Are you talking about the
Like
corruption case?
Yeah, just Lula in general.
Yeah.
Because I know, like, I obviously have hustled on it a lot, and I'm curious the feedback.
Well, so
Yeah.
you're my friend,
Yes.
and so I try to be aware of whether or not I'm being biased or influenced by people around me. So
Right.
I really tried to dig into, the corruption charges and all that. And I have to be honest with you, it sounds like a bunch of bullshit. It really does. I mean, it all hinged on one individual who was given, a plea deal to say all sorts of things about Lula and his corruption. And what I know, and I mean, obviously not to the same extent as someone like Lula, but what I've experienced personally and what I've seen in America when it comes to people who want to fight for the working class and who want reforms and revolution, the way that they're treated by the mainstream media, the way that they're smeared, the way that they're attacked is very real. And those in positions of power will use their power to just smash any individual that they disagree with or any individual that puts their position of power in jeopardy, right? And we saw it to some extent with Ilhan Omar,
Definitely.
right?
Definitely.
And so I just know that whenever it comes to someone who's looking out for the working class, they are always a target. And it doesn't matter how popular they are. If corporations or people with any power want to go after them, they can and they will. And that's the risk that you take. And what I thought was so powerful about Lula was he's still willing to fight, knowing that he's put himself in a huge disadvantage by doing so.
Yeah, I mean, and I always make the point too that, like, look, I think that in a position, again, it's sort of like, I mean, it's very different than Venezuela, but like the truth of the matter is the man is in prison. And he was barred for running for an election, which I think he definitely would have won. He was leading by double digits in the polls. He's still just a good politician, right? Like, just even on that level. If he was still in government, if the Workers' Party was still in government, if the social movements in Brazil were saying, like, no, we need to have like a little bit more critique, then that's one thing, right? But we're in a really extreme situation where democracy's been reversed there, where he is a political prisoner. And also, I would say, and this is where I'm transparent, like, I am shocked that the amount of resources they've put into building a case, this is all they have. Like, it blows my mind. And my position would definitely be, I'm totally transparent about this, that like if they found some relatively low-level corruption, which also has to do with like how Brazil is run, I would still 100% support Lula, right? Like, so the first major scandal that he was embroiled in when he was still president, which he survived, was his party was paying off smaller parties to vote. And ironically, voting on things like increasing the minimum wage and all of these types of things, right? But that's how politics works there.
Right.
And what I think is incredible is that there are people who in the United States would be like the first ones to say, like, you can't criticize Joe Biden for going to, do a fundraiser with a Comcast lobbyist. Like, that's how campaigns are run. And not everybody can be Bernie Sanders, and you should be an adult. Then they go to a context which is even more like brass knuckle, hard to deal with, literal, like, okay, give me a fucking duffel bag, set up a party for me. Like, that's how it works. And people come into power, they navigate that system, they deliver huge things for real people. And at the time, they're praised for becoming pragmatic. That was like when Lula first came to power, it was all like, oh my God, look at him. He was a radical, but now he knows how to work the system. Well, that's what working the system means.
Right.
Like, it means that you cut deals. It means that you make peace with power. It's just that they made peace with power in a way that, as I always say, lifted 40 million people out of poverty. I don't know how much that can be underscored.
Right, exactly. So it is amazing because I remember when we did a story on Brazil and specifically what happened to Lula on the Young Turks, there were a number of our viewers who tend to make excuses for corruption here in the United States, arguing vehemently against what Lula allegedly did, right? And it was just amazing to me because, I mean, look, if you are okay with the type of corruption that we have here in the United States, and this corruption hurts the working and middle class, I mean, we've talked about it over and over again. If you're okay with that, then you have absolutely no leg to stand on when it comes to how politics works in a different country. Now, you could make an argument if there is real evidence other than one person's testimony that Lula, did something horrible and corrupt. But had he done something horrible and corrupt to benefit himself rather than these tens of millions of people, then maybe you have an argument there. But that's not what happened.
That's not what the evidence is. And
Right.
The evidence is like how money, and money was funneled to campaigns. And that's how things work. And also, right, like, and what they have him on is like a middle class condo. Like
I know,
literally,
I
like
know.
that's also what's incredible about it is like you look at the footage and you're like, okay, like that definitely looks like something. I mean, meanwhile, again, Obama, Clinton, they're going and giving these massive, speeches at Goldman.
Right.
They're partying with Richard Branson. Tony Blair is literally advising a Kazakh dictator on how to spin a massacre, and that's all legal. So we need to like redefine our anti-corruption conversation.
Absolutely. One question that I've had, and you would probably know the answer to this, we get a very skewed image or view of what the Brazilian people think about Lula. And I'm curious, following his arrest and his imprisonment, what was the majority public opinion? Was there any type of uprising in Brazil in response to it?
Well, I mean, it's really contradictory, right? Because it's like, on one hand, I think the polling was split almost like 50-50 on whether or not he should go to jail. But then he, again, had like a significant lead in the presidential race. And there was also a recent poll that came out that showed that like a I cannot pronounce that
Plurality.
word. Plurality thought that he was the best president that Brazil had ever had. I think though, like, first of all, there's a segment of voters in Brazil that are like literally, I mean, they are Lula to Bolsonaro voters, which is bizarre, but that's like the Bernie to Trump, right? Like that exists there too. And I think also if what people need to prepare for and think about, it will be different here, of course. But as you were saying earlier, I mean, look, if Bernie Sanders becomes president, there is going to be a unremittent war against him from every single faction of institutional power in this country. And so you had, yes, the economy slowed down under Dilma, whatever, but like you had a turning point in like 2014, 2015, maybe even earlier, where the entirety of the press, the entirety of the establishment went to war against him every single day without any type of broad alternative messaging. So yeah, that's going to have a real impact. That's going to take you from leaving office. I think he left office like 85% approval rating to down to like late 40s, upper 40s, early 50s. I think he's ticking up a little bit again because of how he's handled this, which is mind blowing.
It is mind blowing.
To voluntarily like be like, all right.
The strength of Lula is amazing. But, just going back to what you said about Bernie Sanders, if he wins the nomination, I think you're absolutely right. And I think we're already seeing the mainstream media and its tactics. For instance, the type of questions that Bernie Sanders gets, I have no issue with them per se, but they're obviously very different from the types of questions that other candidates get. So, the last town hall that he did, there was a woman who asked him about Soviet Russia and, just completely mistaking Soviet Russia and communism with some of the socialist programs that Bernie Sanders is pushing for. And that's not an accident. I don't think it's an accident. I mean, he keeps getting those types of questions. The question about allowing prisoners to vote, that was an interesting question to put into the mix, right? And I think that unfortunately did hurt him a little bit in the polls, but whether or not it's going to destroy his chances, I don't know. All I know is they're chipping away, and there needs to be a concerted effort with progressive media to fight back. And right now we're a little fragmented, I think. Yeah. Right. So we need to find a way to kind of get together, maybe create some sort of consortium where we have like a rapid response as soon as As you know what I mean? Like all
Yeah.
hands on deck. We all have our platforms and we all fight together. And there's so many great progressive voices out there. I think that we can do it.
No, I agree with you completely. Let's play a little bit of this Lula B-roll, and I'll read some of this statement, and then we'll go to Biden and Buttigieg, the absolute opposites. But yeah, so he was allowed to give his first press interview. He's been held in solitary confinement. He's been barred from giving like video interviews. And again, this is a country where like heads of cartels and people convicted on like mass murder charges do like general interest interviews. This is the first time the Supreme Court asserted he could speak. They actually tried to stop it for a second. That's Lula. I know he's in his 70s, but I don't think I would look like that after a year in solitary confinement with this suit.
Yeah, he's
Just like, yeah, whatever.
He's on fire.
Alguém acha que os Estados Unidos vai favorecer o Brasil? Americano, pense americano em primeiro lugar, pense americano em segundo lugar, pense americano em
Oh,
terceiro lugar.
this is the part where he actually, you know this part. He said, why is Bolsonaro saluting an American flag? You're supposed to love your mother and your country.
Get
and
their asses.
He said America, what did you say?
And then he's like, I'm
gonna get their ass.
I said, get their ass.
Well, he did say that because one of the main takeaways in the interview, there's a couple of highlights. One is he said Brazil's run by lunatics and the Brazilian elite need to ask themselves how they allowed this to happen. He said America thinks of itself first, second, third, fourth, and fifth.
Yep.
So why should Brazil be thinking of America and trying to appease them? And it's like emasculating, basically. Then he said, and just not dignified, he said, in the region and the poverty he's from, this is, look, he's like laughing. He's like, if I didn't die before I was 5, you don't bow down to anybody. He said he has a feeling he's going to live to 120. So he's looking forward. He will, and he's not. And his sentence has been reduced, and there's talk that he might get put into house arrest in the fall if he pays a fine. And as of now, he's saying like, I am not going to acknowledge wrongdoing. I'm going to leave the prison with my head held as high as I did when I got in here. And
I believe him. I mean,
yeah.
He beat throat cancer.
He beat throat cancer.
That's insane.
He lost 2 fingers. God. And this is a couple of weeks, like after, like within 2 years, his wife has died, his brother has died, his grandson has died. And he just said, I mean, this is a translation, I'll just briefly from Brazil Wire. I can't read all of it, but they sent this to me. He said, we created PT in 1980 to demand democratic freedoms, the rights of people and workers, the accumulation of the struggles of the PT and the Brazilian left, and the syndicalism of social and popular movements led us to consolidate a democratic pact in 1980 Constitution. This pact was broken by the impeachment coup in 2016 and its unfolding, which was my condemnation without guilt and my arrest in record time so that I could not run for election. I reaffirm my innocence, proven by all means of proof in actions that I was unjustly condemned by Judge Sergio Moro. And he goes on and he says, most importantly, I know the injustices against me rests on the Brazilian people who have lost their rights, opportunities, fair wages, formal employment, income, and hope for a better future. Today, I'm here to talk to journalists. As I've done throughout my life, in fact, talk to our people. This right was denied to me for 7 months, and during the electoral process, I was absolutely outlawed. But I keep certainty with me, prisoner or free, censored or not. I have with the Brazilian people an eternal communion that time will not erase. Against all powerful, against censorship and oppression, we will always be together for a better Brazil, more just with opportunities for all. Thank you. And then he also said, he's like, a lot of people saw this coming and I could have gone into exile, but I'm committed to Brazil. So that's him doing his thing.
He's a leader.
He is
That's
a leader.
what leaders do. Leaders fight knowing that it's either unpopular to push for the policies that they're pushing for. And in this case, obviously, his policies were popular. But more importantly, you keep fighting regardless of the attacks and the intimidation. And I mean, he's resilient. He's been in solitary confinement and he's, coming out, fighting like this, resilient. He's not giving up. It's pretty amazing.
It's unbelievable. It's mind blowing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's been released yet, but I know some other people that I have connections with are going to be interviewing him in the next 10 days. So he's going to be continuing to do his thing. But it's just amazing to like. It's one thing that he's pissed. It's another that he still kind of has like his good cheer. Mm-hmm. That's like mind blowing to me.
Yeah,
he's still
for
like,
sure.
yeah, like all right, like sure, I'm in prison, but basically I'm still president. Let's do this.
Yeah. I love it. I love it.
That's fucking awesome. You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.